Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. This is part 3 of my WCOOP 530 final table review. We are looking at four-handed play because it's thrown up some very unique situations. As I said, this is part 3. Time for a blind versus blind battle between first and second. Let's get into it. All right, so as you can see, the short stacks now are very short. You've got the button on 6.2 and you've got the cutoff on 7.3. So the small blind feeling good that he's comfortably in second, but is out chipped right now by the chip leader and has the chip leader on his left. So his strategy coming into this hand is going to be somewhat unique and very, very different from a chip EV strategy that you might have seen before. So let's take a look at what happens. So small blind goes for a limp, which I think is to be expected here with 10-7 suited. I'm just going to pause the video there. So as I said, it is to be expected here with 10-7 suited. But what I think is going to be really interesting to see from the sim is what does their overall strategy look like? Do they have any raises, or do they just want to play like limp only with all of their range? You might think that's crazy, like that's never going to happen, but we've seen crazy things happen in these ICM sims. Maybe you prefer to raise the top and raise the bottom, but what happens when you get 3-bet? How many of the hands that you raise at the top of that range are you going to really want to stack off with? So loads of questions should be already going through your mind. We're just going to comfortably limp call here with 10-7 suited. Be interesting to see what we do with the rest of our range. Once we discover what happens with our strategy, then we can start discussing what happens on this kind of board, because without knowing what we're supposed to do pre-flop, we can't really say, okay, we should have these hands on this board and he should be doing this or she should be doing this or whatever. So I'll show you what happens before I give any thoughts, because we're going to dive into the sim and see what the solution says. So big blind goes ahead and bets here. Be interesting to see if this is the right kind of sizing based on the two strategies. The small blind calls, and then on the turn, small blind is going to check. The big blind is going to go for a big bet now, and this small blind is going to fold. So you might think, okay, well, that's not that interesting. Okay, he's got a pair and a draw here, but he's covered by this player, probably not going to be able to continue anyway, so he should just fold. Let's move on to the next hand. Not a lot of learning can happen from this one hand. But I disagree, because as you're about to find out, the solution is very, very different from what you'd expect. Let's take a look. All right, so one of those questions then was, how is the small blind going to play their strategy? And you can see I've given 3 options here without spoiling it too much. Limping 65.3%, raising 0.5%, and jamming no hands. Let's take a look at this strategy. So yes, a tiny amount of raising, but honestly, I think we should be defaulting to just limping in this spot and limping all of the hands that we want to play. So we're folding some hands down the bottom, but most of the hands we are going just for a limp. When we do that, let's take a look at the big blind strategy. They had ace-8 offsuit here. That raises sometimes and checks back at other times. You see a lot of raising, 50% raising, no jamming, but yeah, similar amount of checks. If we take a look at the risk premiums, you can see small blind against the big blind, 23.7%. So this should, and I hope you were already looking at this and thinking, wow, the guys in third and fourth really, really short. So your risk premium against the guy who covers you is probably going to be really high. You've got to be really careful in this spot. So maybe you're already thinking, yeah, to be honest, I think I would probably play this quite passively. I think the big blind, is going to have to attack us maybe more aggressively than they normally would in a chip EV world. And it'd be interesting to see how we fight back, how we continue. Do we fight back? Do we just have to sort of play very, very passively? So this is what I was saying earlier as well, that if we raise and we get 3-bet, like how many of these hands we realistically want to stack off with when there are 2 players really, really short. So I think this is why we're seeing a very much more passive strategy in this spot. So the big blind goes for a raise, and you can see 10-7 suited, very happy to call in this spot. But if we look at the other hands, what is going on here? So ace king off and ace king suited just want to jam. Ace is happy to limp 3-bet and get it in, obviously. And then you've got a mixture of other hands that want to 3-bet fold. So you've got all of these hands. You can see there's little bits of sort of pinky red color down here, and some king 3 suited, king 2 suited, and even some jamming from ace 3 off and ace 4 off. So what is going on here? So we don't ever want to just have really strong hands in our jamming range. If we just jammed ace king, then there's no real incentive for the big blind to call off, a little bit wider. When we do jam, this is their calling range. Jacks plus ace king, tens is in there a little bit of the time. But when we do jam a hand like ace 3 off or the ace deuce off that I think was in there, then we're getting lots of better hands to fold. So we're getting ace queen, ace jack, ace 10, ace 9 to fold. It's pretty high risk. You're risking a lot of big blinds in a situation when the player in third and player in the fourth are really, really short. But is it really a risk if you're only getting called a tiny fraction of the time? Like, yes, there's some risk involved, but the chance of you getting called is really, really small. So you might look at this and think, okay, so why ace 3 off and not like ace 7 off? Well, the weaker hand that you jam, or the weaker the hand that you jam here, the more hands that are better than that hand are going to fold. So if you would suddenly wanted to, like, I don't know, jam ace 10 off, you're getting all these weaker hands to fold plus a few better hands to fold. But when you jam a hand like ace 3 off and ace 4 off, and I think earlier on I maybe misspoke and said ace deuce off, although there is some jamming in there as well, you actually get all these better ace-x hands to fold, and you get some pairs to fold as well. You get all of these pairs to fold. One of the other benefits of jamming a hand like ace 3 off is that you block the calling range. So you have an ace in your hand, you block aces, and you block ace king, and you're not in terrible shape. I mean, it's not great to get it in against kings, queens, jacks, and tens, but you're not in terrible shape in that spot. But the main focus here is that you're supposed to call a lot of hands here, even hands like kings and queens and jacks, an ace queen suited, an ace queen off. All of these hands are going to make it into a calling range. I think what's going to happen now is, if we look at the big blind strategy, these are the kind of hands that want to raise here. So you can see like some strong hands, but also some very, very weak hands. When they do that, we are calling with hands that are very strong, like kings and queens and jacks, as I mentioned, ace queen, and we're folding a lot of the garbage hands that we'd gone for a limp with in the first place. So I think this is going to have a massive effect on this strategy. Let's take a look in Pio. All right, so we just go for a pure check here. You can see what's going on here, but something that might interest you is we actually have the equity advantage here. So we have 57% equity. In position only has 42.5% equity. So why is that? Why is that happening? Well, we've got some really strong hands in here. Yes, we don't have aces, and they could do, but we've got some jacks, and we've got sevens full frequency, and we've got ace jack suited and ace jack off very, very frequently. We've even got some jack 7 suited in here as well. Now, the big blind can have some strong hands, aces, jacks, sevens, ace jack, stuff like that. But we, as a proportion of our range, we're going to have more of those strong hands. Plus, if you look at it, we have a lot of ace-x hands here. We have the kings, we have queens, we have jack-x, a decent number of strong jack-x hands as well. So we are just going to have a stronger range overall. So this should have an effect on what the big blind wants to do. Let's take a look. So when I first looked at this was a real surprise to see that we mainly, in the big blind shoes, want to go for this big bet, and there's not much small betting happening. Now, we could go down that small bet note, but you can see it's only happening 0.01% of the time. Not that useful. I think the biggest exercise here is, or the biggest learning point, is that this big bet is used most frequently. So the big blind has an equity disadvantage and a nut disadvantage. So really wants to check quite a lot, and then if they do decide to bet, then they're using the bigger size. And you can see where those bets are coming from. It's going to be the strong ace-x hands to get called by the weaker ace-x hands, because we don't have aces, we don't have ace-king. So we have ace-queen. So ace-king is a very easy, value bet, because we have ace-queen and ace-10 and ace-9. And you can see, though, that once we get down to like ace, let's even say like ace-9, well, we do have the ace-queen and the ace-10 that are better than ace-9 currently. So there are fewer hands that we have that ace-9 is going to be doing well against and want to put lots of money in. But I think this is a real surprise. As I said, I was really surprised to see this strategy. If they do go for the big bet, you can see 10-7 of spades, just going to go for a fold. We want to have more going on, so we'd want to have that backdoor flush draw to go with our backdoor straight draw and pair. But yeah, we have bottom pair. When I say we just want to fold, you can see it's in there a little bit of the time, 22% as a call. But I think if we look at the EV, it's not looking great. So I think we could be fairly confident just letting it go. Obviously, against a really, really strong player, if we end up folding these hands too frequently, we are just going to get run over. But, that's just one of the considerations for this spot. Against the small bet, as I said, it's only happening 0.01% of the time. I think in hindsight, I would have liked to run the sim and forced the small bet and no big bets, just to see what effect that had. But you can see 10-7 is very, very happy to call here. But I don't think it's going to be that useful to continue the analysis down this node because it doesn't happen very frequently at all. The biggest takeaways from this hand should be how strong your equity is out of position, which is quite unusual, and especially on this kind of board. And also how little the big blind actually wants to bet. They do want to be checking a huge amount of the time, and when they do bet, they want to be using the bigger size. So loads to take away from part 3 of this series. I'm going to be back soon with part number 4. If you haven't done so already, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.